The United Nations has sacked the commander of its peacekeeping force in South Sudan. It's better known as UNMISS. The UN has released a scathing report about the response of peacekeepers during recent clashes in that country. The report says UN peacekeepers failed to respond to an attack on a hotel in the capital, Juba. Now, that is despite the hotel being less than a mile from the UN peacekeepers' compound. These findings are from an inquiry done by the UN itself. It found that the peacekeepers are not sufficiently prepared and there was ineffective command. The main mandate of the UN mission in South Sudan is to protect civilians. Let's figure out exactly where we're heading, where this particular decision leads to now. Nick Harper joins me now live from New York. Nick, this is a pretty drastic move soon after the release of the UN probe on the attack. Was this the expected response?
Well, absolutely, Rama. Yes, a drastic move. We were at least expecting that this would be a damning report. The United Nations very much wanting to get to the bottom of what happened during several days of violence back in July and to try and work out whether or not the UN peacekeeping mission in the country was adequate. So we know that the force commander has been removed. We're told that that has been implemented immediately. We also know that Ban Ki-moon felt very strongly about this. He moved very quickly to get this report to happen, to get this investigation underway. Speaking just an hour ago, the spokesperson for the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Stefan Dujarric, said that Ban Ki-moon was deeply distressed by the findings and that he reiterated his outrage over these acts of violence. That is the type of language we don't normally hear from Ban Ki-moon. Some very strong language in response to what seems to be a very damning report.
Indeed. Bring us up to speed with the details in this report. I believe the UN Secretary General had commissioned a retired Dutch military officer to actually work on it. What exactly was contained in that report?
That's right. So this was a special investigation looking in particular at about 3 days of violence that happened in July and then a separate incident that happened about a week or so after that in mid to late July. This was an investigation that looked at the actual response from the peacekeeping mission, and the response was that there were serious shortcomings. The UN estimates that about 73 people died during those 3 days of violence. However, they do say that that is very much on the conservative side. And they're quite simply, peacekeepers, when they were asked to respond to what was happening less than a mile away, said that they were already fully committed, that they were too busy to go and help the civilians who were being attacked and killed. So some of the key highlights from this report found that they did not respond effectively to the violence. The lack of response was due to an overall lack of leadership, and that led to a chaotic and ineffective response to the violence, and that the command and control arrangements were inadequate. Quite simply put, the report says, peacekeepers maintained a risk-averse posture. They didn't help, and it was their mandate to protect and serve those civilians.
Well, given the level of rot that's been exposed in this report, after the sacking of the UNMISS force commander, what other action is being recommended? Are we likely to see, for example, perhaps criminal prosecution of these soldiers who are responsible?
Well, there's been no word as to whether that would happen, but the United Nations are saying that other recommendations will be coming out over the coming days and weeks, recommendations that they intend to put into force very quickly. Of course, they would like to be able to have accountability, to find out which of the government soldiers, but also the rebel fighters there as well, were involved in this violence, to hold them accountable for these killings. But we also know that the head of the mission in South Sudan, Ellen Lodge, she has also been dismissed and she will be stepping down at the end of November. She's been in this post for just over 2 years. So the United Nations moving swiftly and moving decisively to try and get to the bottom of this, but also to try and make sure that this level of violence and this level of ineffectiveness from UN peacekeepers doesn't happen again in South Sudan or any of its peacekeeping missions around the world.
Indeed, let's see if this does set a tangible precedent. Thank you for that. That's Nick Harper live, of course, in New York.